In this lesson, we're going to continue our implementation of the queue class. So let's move down to the public section of the class. Let's add some more functionality. Count will display the number of items in a queue. So here we're just going to simply do a count. So we'll say int count equals 0. I from 0 to the back, or we could have said from int I equal front, but either one works fine. So every time through the loop, we simply increment our count variable by 1, then we'll return that. There are other ways to implement count, but that's just a very simple way that'll work well. We also want to be able to display what's at the front of the queue, as well as what's at the back. We probably need to test to see if the queue is empty. So here we're just going to say if back equals -1, return true, brace, else return false. Then we also want to be able to clear the queue. So we'll need to write void clear, and then for int I equal front, I less than or equal to the back, plus I. Let's put a curly brace there. Then data store sub I equals empty string, again because we're working with strings here. I'm not going to look at every single one of these functions to see if they work. Let's take the code that we had before, and this time let's change a couple of things. Let's look at the front and the back a couple of times. We'll call those two functions. In fact, every place we have show, let's replace that with showing the front and the back. Let me just copy it in. Take it out there, put it in here, and do that one more time. And just for good measure, let's also add the count. So I'll copy that and add it in here, and here, and there. All right, so let's build and run this program. Oh, I see. The problem we have right here, and I'm glad I left this error in, is that this function name interferes with the variable name. So we'll call this queue front, and we're going to call this queue back. And then what we'll have to do is we'll have to go into each one of these calls and change them. But once again, as I always say, you're getting a look at what real programming is like, where you have a great idea, but it conflicts with something you're already doing, so you have to make some simple little typographic changes, because that's all we're doing here, is changing the name. The implementation was correct. All right, let's try it again. I hope I got them all. Yeah, there we go. So when it was ABC, the front was A, the back was C, the count was 3. Then it was BC, so the front was B, the back was C, the count was 2. Then it was BCD, the front was B, the back was D, the count was 3. Then at the very end, it's C and D, and the count is 2. So here's our implementation of the queue class with the data store, that's an array, variables to indicate the front and the back of the queue, a shift method so that when we take an item out of the queue, we can move every item up in the queue, a constructor, a function to get data into the queue, a function to remove data from the queue, a function to display the contents of the queue, a function to tell us how many items are in the queue, functions for showing the front and the back items in the queue. If the queue is empty, again, we wouldn't want to implement out without is empty. So we might even change is empty or do it inside user code. And we're going to demonstrate how that works in one of the examples at the end of the chapter, so I'm not going to belabor the point right now. And then, of course, we might want to be able to clear out a queue to use it again, so we have a clear method. So that wraps up this lesson on queues, and we'll come back to an example, and in the example later in the chapter we'll also see how to make the queue generic.